So generally, a database is designed to hold information, and you would have a single layer of information called a record that might pertain to a specific case number or might pertain to a specific person. And within that record, you'll have fields, and that identifies very specific data that is attributed to that single person. So the process in creating an Excel database is that we look at the forms that you have and figure out which kind of fields might be within your database. So we started with the personal log. No particular reason, it's just that it had more data fields than some of the others. And so when you look at that personal information log form, you have a place for the name, you have a place for date of birth, address, and so on. And then, of course, you could look at the name, and it could be further divided into these particular fields. So you could just have a field for the full name, enter it exactly as you see fit, or you could separate it out into Mr., Ms., Mrs., first, middle, last, junior, senior, etc. Same thing for the address. You could have the street address, city, state, and zip as all separate fields, or you could just have a single field for the address. The real difference here is when you're searching for somebody. You might search for a group of people that are all located in the same city or the same zip code or even on the same street. So if you break it up a little bit, you're bound to get better results when you do a search of that database. Same thing with reporting. So if you wanted to start to report statistics, you could start to report based upon any of the fields that you have present. So under the personal information log, these were the fields that you had. So it started with name and it ended with the eye color. For some of these fields, like the descendant, where you had options underneath, I created what's called a drop-down list. So when you click on that particular field to enter data, a list drops out and it will let you choose first gen, second gen, or other. And then if there is another tribe that they belong to, there's a separate field to enter that tribe in. Same thing with hair color and eye color. I listed out some of the standard colors for hair. But one thing I want to alert you to, and this is just so that you understand how these work, in the drop-down list for hair color, I use the term brunette instead of brown. So if you attempted to type brown into that field and it wasn't one of these drop-down list items, that would return an error message to you. And you can easily change those drop-down list items to fit the terminology that you're most familiar with. So once we had the fields determined, then we're ready to create the database. And so I'm going to pull up the Excel file here and give you an idea of what happens. So you open up Excel and you see what is essentially a spreadsheet. And a spreadsheet that is a functional database provides you with column headers that are alphabetical and with row indicators that are numerical. So each one of these squares would be considered a field where you're entering in data. And then you can see when I highlight one of these squares here by clicking on it, you'll get a yellow highlight on the column as well as the row indicator. So this field would be mapped as C2. And that will come in handy when you're creating your own databases or creating your own functions. So we'll get to that at some other point. But one of the things I wanted to show you was that if you were starting a new database, that you can actually go to New, and Microsoft is pretty good about providing templates. And so rather than recreate a database and have to format all of the fields to fit your needs, you can oftentimes search. And so one of the things that I did was to search for an address database or a contacts database. And this would serve as a good foundation for the personal log. And this is similar to the one that I pulled up. So you can click on it once, and it shows you that it has some formatting to it. You download that file, and then you can start with that file. So what I have done is I've already set up two database files in Excel. One is the personal information log, database, and the other is a scheduling order. The personal information logs database, it pairs with 4 of the forms that you provided to me, and the scheduling order only pairs with that scheduling order. And there's no real reasoning or logic behind why I did 2. It's just really about how many fields are actually in the particular database. So I'm going to pull up the personal information log database first. And when I have, this is a good thing to know, when I have the personal information log open, the template, which is this one, it's already paired to that database. And so when this file is open, it believes that the other file is open as well. So I'm going to pull it up, and we'll do it in read-only just so that you can see it here. And I'm going to scroll over to the left so you can see all of the fields. So I put in some just data that will just hold our fields open here. So working off the personal information log, I just went down that list of fields. So you have the name. I didn't break it up into any subfields. It could be first and last, the date of birth, and I formatted this field. And with the formatting, you can click the field, right-click, and you'll pull up a menu that says Format Cells. And from this formatting cells, you can choose from the category, which we chose date, and then I scrolled down for the birth date so it would show the month, the day, and the full 4 numbers for the year, and chose that, and you say OK. That formats the cell that's selected. If you go to the right corner and you get the little cross, you can drag the formatting down. So now these cells all share the same formatting. We've got a street address, the city, the state, the zip code. The zip code is format cells, go to special, choose zip code, and it's going to tell you that it gives you a 5-character sample. You say OK. We grab this, and you can see right here there's a date entered. That's not what we want. So I'm going to pull this formatting down over that date, and it's going to copy what I had above. But now the formatting is there. So now if I try to put in 1 extra number and hit enter, it's going to take it because there's no restriction on the side. But if I try to put in, it's all doing numbers. Okay. So there's no restriction on the size, but it is formatted that way now. Same thing with the phone number is formatted. Email was also formatted. I didn't put in any driver's license. I didn't know the tribal member numeric membership number, but those could also be customized and formatted. So after putting in the personal information log and we made it through to the next form, then I added a place to put in the case number, police report, counts 1 through 8. And so this fills out a few of the other forms that you provided. So here's the trick. One of the things that's very frustrating about Excel is that when you're putting data in, you have to go across the screen, and it's really difficult to see the name on the far left and then try and enter something about them on the far right. And you could freeze the panes, meaning holding this column always visible while these shift underneath it. But Excel has a nice format that is called Forms. And it is this icon at the top left corner of your screen that looks like a little data entry user interface. If you don't have that defaulted on your screen, you go to this drop-down arrow and you choose the More Commands. And essentially this allows you to add things to that very top menu level. So you would find the form entry on the left-hand side of your screen. Now mine is already up there, so it's not on the left-hand side, but if it was, it would roughly be right here under the font size. You would highlight it, and then you would say Add, and it would come over here. And so once you add it, you say OK, and then the icon shows up on your top banner. Once it's up there, and you have your field headers and your first row of data. You just have to highlight. If you only have 1 or 2 rows, it's okay, but if you highlight all of your data rows and you go all the way over to the last column, I'm going to highlight this bottom one even though it has no data in it. And now I click this form button, we'll get a data user entry form. And so it shows you the data that is actually in the database right now, and it's showing you that it's one of 3 entries. You can choose from here to create a new record and enter new data in this form where you can see all of the fields pertaining to that person. Or you can also search using this form, and if you search, you click criteria. It gives you an empty form. You go to the criteria you want to check, so we'll go with state, and we'll type in CA for California, and then I'll say find previous, and that was just me guessing because I knew the data was at the top. And I can say find next. Here is California. Actually, let me try that one more time. So here's California. Let's say find next. And it shows up with the one person from California. And, 3 of 3. I must have put them all in California. Let's see. Find previous, find next. So it is just the one person. I'm going to close this. The form goes away. When you add new data in the form, and you get to the very last field and you either tab out or you click new record when you're all done entering data, you'll see the data fill into the spreadsheet behind you. So that is about it in terms of, get rid of this screen. The drop-down list I wanted to show you, when you click one of those fields, you'll see a little arrow come up to the right of that field. And you click that box, and it gives you the drop-down list. The drop-down list is not as straightforward as you hope. If you had clicked the box and you hit return and it says pick from a drop-down list, you would think that that would get you where you need to go. But you have to create a list for it to choose from. So with the first table, you always create if you're going to do drop-down lists, a secondary page or a secondary spreadsheet. And I always name it drop-down option so I can tell it apart from my main sheet. And you click on it, and you can see over here for the descendants options, which were descendant, first gen, second gen, and other, that's A 1 through 4. For hair, it is B 1 through 6. For the eyes, C 1 through 4. So I just put those entries in, and remember we were talking about mapping that data. You want to be able to know that it's C 1, 2, 3, and 4. So with that being said, let's go back to the main table, and we'll create a drop-down. You can see these are already connected to the drop-down list. But what you would do, you would highlight the field that you wanted to go in, and you would choose data, and then after choosing data, you're going to go to data validation, and then choose data validation again. And this dialog box is probably the best term. It gives you the option. So under allow, you want to choose, it'll default to any value, but you want to choose list. And when you choose list, you'll get a source box. You just click into the source box, and it's defaulting to the page that I originally had it on. But to search that page, you would click this little icon here, and then you would click the sheet you want, and then you would highlight the text from the top all the way down to the bottom. And then you would hit enter or return. And it comes back and it gives you the coding for, I would go to essentially the sheet, drop down options, actually going to, let's do this over. I think I've got too much info in here. I'm going to take out the old info so we can see this clearly. So normally when you get in there, it would say any value. And you would just see this, any value under allow and data, and it would ask you to verify where the data was coming from. When I choose list, it gives me source box. Click into the source box, and here is where you're going to click the icon, and now it's going to let you click your drop-down options, and it's just going to map out all the steps that you do. And somehow we scrolled way down and way over, so we just got to scroll back over to where our drop-down options are. Click the first one in the list, hold, and drag to the last one. And it's mapping out that the source is going to be taken from the drop-down options sheet, beginning with B1, going through B6. We hit enter, and then we hit OK. And that establishes the drop box for that range. If you miss one of them, it just won't show up in the drop list. If you try to enter something that's not in the drop list, it will return an error for you. Okay, so that will be where we stop for the time being.
Thank you. Please stand by.